Okay, so Choosing Happiness, episode 7, Madiha creator.
Mashal Pirzada, guest.
Guest, correct. A guest and also CEO of Yellow Brick Creative Development, as well as a storyteller.
Yes.
Also, my very, very beautiful friend. So, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for
Oh,
having
God,
me.
this sounds a little formal, but here we go. Choosing happiness should be simple, right, as a subject. And what was happening prior to this podcast was a half an hour of a breakdown at my end, nothing to do with the podcast, but very related to the subject, which is how choosing happiness shouldn't be an effort, shouldn't feel like an effort, and it needs to be done in acceptance of and an acknowledgement of all the pain and the fear and the uncertainty that we have around us. And for me, the reason why it came out today, it has been coming out of the past 2 weeks, is that again, the concept that I'd attached to healing and of being on this journey, which meant that you constantly choose positivity, you constantly choose happiness. And what that translated into for me was every day when you are assaulted with a truckload of events, incidences, or emotions, your job is to pack it up and store it in a pretty looking storeroom, which I had done. I didn't realize that I'd done that. And look outside the window, look at the birds singing, look at the tree, anything but that storeroom, anything but those increasing number of baggages and suitcases that you were using to hide away, pack away your emotions. And somehow I think in the past 1 month, what's beginning to hit me, and it's been a wave, is the fact that we can't do that. And when we do that, that's when choosing happiness feels like a struggle, feels like you're going uphill constantly, and the weight that you feel on your back and of your own body starts to become heavier, and it feels heavier. It's becoming heavier, but also feels heavier. And it's inevitable then that, on one incline, on one slope, even if there's like a small, nice, patchy part, you would perhaps tell yourself you're sitting there to rest for a while, but you don't want to get up again. And you don't want to go up anymore. And you just want to stay there and wait for time to end somehow. Or somebody to come and get you, some miracle to happen. And I love what you said when I was having that panic attack, because what you did say was, whatever you're feeling in this moment is exactly that. It is this moment. Allow yourself to feel it. And just because you're feeling broken does not mean that you are broken. Just because you're feeling hurt does not mean that you are a hurting person. And just because you're feeling pain does not mean that everything has been painful forever. It will stay that way. It has to change. That's the law. It has to change. So I want to ask you, in that moment it made sense, and I planted both my feet firmly on the ground, and I held on to my drawer's handle for the nearest solid support that I could find, and then you hugged. So all of that helped. But tell me something. In that moment, when you're feeling all of these emotions, an assault of them, what does it mean to choose happiness?
Well, so I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, that I don't think that it's mandatory that the choice of happiness be effortless. I think there is effort behind it. We have to take that agency to do what we need to do to be a more content, peaceful, happy version of ourselves. I also don't find positivity and happiness synonymous.
Oh.
I do think that there is a lot of pressure on staying positive, take the positive point of view, positively man. And these are all great things. There is nothing wrong with it. The downside of it, as you said, is that it is sort of putting a lot of pressure on people to sort of almost shame them out of feeling their negative feelings, and whereas positivity can be a wonderfully powerful tool to counter limiting self-beliefs, to help pick yourself up, there's some things that just need to be processed. what will drive you to process those things? Either when you actually cannot take it anymore, or because you want to choose to let go of them and be a happier person. Like you're talking about the storeroom with the boxes. We're never not aware of that storeroom. We're never not aware of what's packed in those boxes. They're always kind of looming. This whole idea of choosing happiness very much came to me when there was, a lot of talk about the pursuit of happiness, and the film had just come out, and everyone was like gushing over words. That was a great movie, no doubt. But it started to this phrase, the pursuit of happiness, really, really started to irk me. It implies that happiness is something external, elusive, detached from yourself, which I don't believe. I think all the happiness you need is within you. It's in your give to access it. It's in your give, your agency to do what needs to be done to reconnect with it. It's not something that's separate from us. It's something that's within us, that is us. And that's, to me, what it means to choose happiness. So to do the hard work to choose happiness is part of that. Sometimes you've got to trek through the muck.
I love what you said about how happiness is not external and it's within us, because I remember about 6 years, 6 years ago, I was with a friend. She was visiting, and we were sitting down about 12 o'clock at a random cafe in Defense. And, somehow this conversation came up, and I said, listen, the default mode that we have, the natural state that we are, is of happiness. It's what comes easiest and most naturally to us. We spend a lifetime building barriers somehow against it, and we don't build them consciously. We spend a lifetime experiencing events and giving ourselves another excuse and another excuse not to plug back into that natural reserve of happiness that we're born with. So the story that I tell myself, and it's a story that I believe in because it's the story of my soul, is that in the very, 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 very beginning, at the moment of my creation, there was me and the Creator. And the Creator looked at me without the soul of me, and looked at me with such love and breathed such love into me that I became. And so the moment of my creation is that of love. The moment of my creation, what was breathed into me, my life force, my breath, is love. And everything that is not love is unnatural to my state. Now, when I say unnatural, what I spent a lot of my life decoding it as was unnatural means that all the other emotions are not welcome. All the other emotions are not supposed to be here. And I feel like a lot of us do that when we go out searching for happiness, that we begin to fight with the human part of us, the life part of us. And when we feel like it's becoming harder, we shut ourselves off. Now, that shutting ourselves off may look very different for different people. It doesn't mean that you stop interacting. It doesn't mean that you stop having relationships. You might be functioning as a functional human being. You'd have a job, you'd have a family, you'd have kids, you'd have parents, you'd have siblings, friends, you'd socialize. You'd be a good, healthy, grounded individual. But you also know that you're playing it safe. You're staying within a tight circle that you've drawn around yourself, because it's a circle that you have, and that circle began off not as a tight circle. It began off as a big baseball field, but it started becoming smaller, shrinking from the years that you've lived and the experience you've had, and it became a very small, tight circle. And begin to pride yourself on how I'm very selective, and there is merit to being selective in the people that you interact with, and people that you choose to share your energy with. But what you're also doing with that is that you are not giving yourself permission to experience the events that may have brought pain and hurt to you differently. And I feel like a big part of choosing happiness begins when you sit with yourself and you say, okay, hey Madiha, these are the years that I've spent. These are the experiences that have brought me an immense amount of pain that I've not been able to face. But from this point onwards, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but from this point onwards, I give myself permission, I allow myself to step into the same experiences with the hope that the outcome might be different. And it is that choosing to step back out of your circle, a tight one that you defined, is the beginning of choosing happiness. And the reason why I believe like it's an act is that it very physically is. Imagine the first moment that you have decided it's a first physical step you will be taking outside that circle. So there's an act that you have committed yourself to. And it goes back then to in that moment you've committed to that act and you've physically stepped outside that circle. What are you going to choose in the next moment and in the next moment? So how do you going, because it's for me it's not just a conversation today. For me it's I want to learn about how to choose from you. I'm getting a little teary-eyed. I want to learn because I feel like it's taken me a lot of years to be able to take that first step outside that tight circle. I don't know how to keep doing that in every moment. That I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would say that it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself to say, to work like, so with this infinite persistence. There are moments when you're not going to take that step. It's okay. Like yours, if you truly believe that that you are born in love, which is beautiful, and I think so, love is vulnerability, love is kindness, and of course these also open you up to hurt and that thing, but unless you are willing to give yourself back the same love you were born into, the same kindness, the same patience, the same vulnerability, the moment that you put so much pressure on yourself that, okay, I have to keep this going, I have to, I felt like I'm not a believer in the word have to.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I needed to hear it.
What I like is wanting, and I'm sort of a greedy hedonist. That's my fundamental nature, right? So for me, it's all about I want to. And again, that to me, that choice of word is my choice of happiness. It's a choice between an obligation and something that gives me joy. I want to take this step. I want to open. I want to put myself in a scary situation. I want to process my trauma. I want to feel positive.
I'm feeling the liberating energy of you just having exchanged the have to want to. And I read about this so many times in so many books, and why am I not? It didn't register.
It's reconditioning your neural pathways. For me, actually, it really started when I really wanted to be working out, but I wasn't. And every day I think, well, I have to go to the gym, I have to go to the gym. The minute that I started saying, I want to go to the gym, I want to. I don't look like I'm going to the gym, but it's a process. Everything is a process. But, again, when you talk about happiness, you should talk about things that bring, and not just, and again, when I say joy, I don't mean that you need to be going through life constantly being at a 10, right? But to have that contentment that what I am doing from my own free will, because it gives me some kind of joy, contentment, peace, or pleasure. If it doesn't, life places a lot of obligations on us. Why should we place more obligations on ourselves? And it's hard. It's hard to keep it is a process. You have to keep sort of pulling yourself back into that zone that why am I doing this? And okay, if I have to do this, I'll do it, but then I'll do something else to compensate for it. So I think that it's a constant balancing. If anything is constant, it's the balancing act, right? For me, it really begins with, and this is, I think, the courageous part, and this is where I often stumble, right? It begins with taking ownership and responsibility. Expecting anything or anyone else to be your joy driver, to give you to provide you with happiness. It's not their job. It's nobody's job. It's nothing's job. You are owed nothing.
Yeah.
And once you can tap into that, once you can tap, it's really scary, but it's also really empowering to know that there is only me. I am entirely responsible for how I am feeling, processing, and giving back.
And I think as a woman, it's again a learned act. It doesn't come naturally because we've been taught to be well, we naturally are givers also, more so than the other gender, but we're also taught to capitalize on that giving phenomenon. So what happens when you have been giving and you get used to it? Because I think what the other thing that translated for me was the fact that in the giving, you expect the receiving. And when you're not full yourself and you're giving from an empty plate and you expect the other person to fill that plate for you, chances are they're not going to be able to do that. They won't be able to do that. And you become disappointed in not having received what you were expecting. One. And the second part of it is most of your relationships lose the purity and become a little transactional. I did this for you, therefore you now should do this for me. Except that, and most of the times those relationships don't work out in any, like in a family or for friends, in any way they don't work out. So the choice that I started making, and it started very, very small, which was it started with giving myself my space in my own home. Now, it's an alien concept to most women because we have bedrooms that we share with our partners. We have the kitchens, we have the lounge, we have the kids' rooms, and that's it. Whether you're working or not, we don't have our space. Now, the first question, what do you need your space for? Is there something that you want to do? So important. And again, it's not linked to the dimensions of the space. So I remember when I first was very clear on the idea that I wanted to have a space on my own, I had my own house. So there was an entire room that I could overhaul, refurbish, and make it my space. So that began then. Then I shifted outside to another country, and we shifted to a condo where it was a 3-bedroom condo, and I did not have my space. But within my bedroom that I was sharing with my daughter, I created a dreaming. So I put a chair and a table, some books, some candles, of flowers, a couple of paintings in the same room, and I started calling it my space within the same room. It was a bigger space, but it would give me a lot of joy in being able to sit there and sometimes just sit there on a phone call with a friend, or just sit there while working. It was just my place. Like, us chair ke upar phir koi baithta bhi nahi tha. I used to call it my dreaming chair, right? Then I shifted back to Pakistan. I'm still in between right now. And so I'm living in a guest room. And in that guest room, the room is now even smaller. So now I have a my corner. So my corner has, again, candles, my books, my lamps. And because it's a corner, I've overdone it with like 3 paintings. Like I've just put a painting on the table and then 2 on the wall. But it's really it. Now, what that place does for me, that corner does for me, it gives me joy. It just does. It gives me joy. And then what I've also done is in the bottom drawer, I've kept choti chocolates. So at times when my daughter is asleep and I'm watching Netflix, whatever, it makes me really happy to be able to open that drawer and have a chocolate that only I know it's there, and it's only for me. Now and I do not share it with my daughter. I don't. She has her own stash of chocolates, and it's in a separate drawer. It's so important for me. I don't. Yeah. But I feel like the same formula it slowly started trickling into other aspects of my life, where I started taking out my time on every weekend, and it was a trip to the spa, tea with a friend, whatever it was, your sofa sometimes, because that's where I'd come and crash. Yeah. So how do we, I think that choosing happiness for yourself, especially as a woman, and choosing to fill your plate first doesn't have to be big things. They don't have to be revolutionary things. It can become small. We've got to have things that only purely bring us joy, only for ourselves, and they 100% reflect who we are, all aspects of us, right? And they don't have to be justified to anybody, don't have to be protected from anyone, and don't have to be explained to anybody either. So the fact that that corner is
that they have no purpose other than that they bring
I
us
love
joy.
that. Yeah.
That is their sole purpose. I think that is very important.
Yeah. So one is joy spaces, for example. If you were to break it down, okay, how do we begin to choose happiness? Say today
You
we
can call them pleasure spots.
might have to edit this out. No, I'm not going to edit this. I'm not going to edit this out. A mature audience tuning in, hopefully. So I'm not going to edit this out. But, so what are the acts? What are the specific acts that which have worked for you? I can only think, like right now I've thought of one. And so one act is give yourself space in the place that you're living in, be it your office or your home, preferably both, which are truly represented. So they're your spaces and they bring you joy, and don't have to have no other purpose but giving you or bringing you joy. So that's act one. What could be like, what other acts have worked for you in choosing happiness?
I think indulging things that I enjoy. For me, it's cooking and indulging them indulgently, that, okay, don't just cook a meal because you have to feed a family. Cook a meal just because you want to do something like luxe and complex, and that. For me, it's that. Physical exercise has.
But if I may
been
add
something.
to your entire cooking experience that you create for joy, I love how, again, it's not just cooking for you. It's the platter that you choose for you. It's the condiments that you create yourself, and then the small little bowls that you put there. It's then for you, it's the linen that you put out, and the entire spread then that you put out for people, and then it also translates into people that you invite at your table. So it starts from the second act, which is the act of doing something, creating something that you love, is then do it or commit to it and do it all out. Which is what you do. It's such a pleasure when you throw a lunch, when you host. Again, you don't throw a lunch, you host one. So that's the difference.
Well, again, because it makes me really happy. And the thing is that I don't think that pursuing your own happiness, your own joy, is mutually exclusive to giving. I think you're absolutely right. There have to be some things that are just contained within yourself. For me, like you said, the act of entertaining or hosting or having people in my home, or creating a meal for my family, or doing something at a larger scale like Christmas or whatever, the act of sharing that and giving that, celebrating somebody's birthday. I love celebrating birthdays, right?
We celebrate birthday months. We don't celebrate birthdays.
Birthday
like my birthday month is here.
So sometimes it's that act of giving that is giving you pleasure. Sometimes it is investing in the people that you love. And investing with this thing that I'm doing this because it makes me happy.
Because I want to.
Because I want to.
I love that.
Not because and of course you will, through life, you will find yourself doing a lot that you will, especially in interpersonal interactions, you'll find yourself doing a lot that you have to do because it's expected or it's obliged. But when you can find those moments to do just because you want to. I often, I'll be like, oh yeah, coming over to my house, doing this. Oh, what's the occasion? I want
just
to.
because I want
just
to.
because I want to.
Yeah.
So creating that space, indulging in things that bring you pleasure, and without judgment, right? Like without judging yourself for finding pleasure in something stupid. Sometimes watching reality TV is a secret guilty pleasure of mine. And I still judge myself for that, but not really. But yeah, so not judging yourself for the things you enjoy. If it's stupid, if it's a little bit embarrassing.
Because it doesn't have to make sense to anybody.
It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't even have to make sense to you.
Yeah.
Because I think that sometimes it's the stupid stuff that connects you to that inner kid, and that inner kid is like where your joy lives.